Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's lecture. And this week, we're going to be learning about the basic elements of individual behavior in organizations. And so some of the things I want us to make sure that we learn is what is the nature of the individual and organization, the place where you work, relationship? And what are some of the personalities and personality attributes that actually affect your behavior? And what about your attitude? How does that affect your behavior in the workplace? We'll also learn about the perceptual processes and the role of attributions in the workplace. We'll learn about the causes and consequences of stress and how can you manage your stress? What are some ways you can do that? We'll describe creativity and its role in the workplace and in the organization. And lastly, we'll learn about how workplace behavior can directly or indirectly influence organizational effectiveness. So I want to start off with this important concept of the psychological contract. Psychological contract is a set of expectations that is held by you, the individual, with respect to what you will contribute to the organization and what you expect the organization to provide in return. So contributions are what the individual you provide to the organization. Inducements are what the organization provides to you, the individual. Now, the reason why we talk about this important concept is because it's important for us to understand that what influences the psychological contract are our attitudes, our behaviors, and our personalities. And so throughout this presentation, you're going to hear what are our expectations of organizations and how we interact with organizations based on some of these attributes, behaviors, and attitudes. So we're going to talk about how to understand individuals, why they do what they do, and how that influences organizational progress. So going back to this concept of the psychological contract, the contributions that you provide to the organization are your efforts, your ability, your skills, your experiences, your degree, all of those things, your uniqueness, your time, your competencies, and you provide that. And in return, the organization that you work for provides job pay, security, career opportunities, status, promotion opportunities, rewards, all types of incentives in order for you to produce results for the organization. But this is something that at times is implied or even it's said in a contract, right? So you come into the organization with these skills, and in return, usually it's explicit or it can be implicit. Now, the other piece that's very important to think about is the person job fit. Now, it's the extent to which the contributions that you make match the inducements of the organization. Now, if you come into an organization, so say, for example, you're starting out your role in healthcare organization and you come in with your experience, your degree, your competencies, your skills, and in return, you may expect from that higher pay, rewards, more time off, vacation. There's all different types of rewards that you may expect from that employer. And what's interesting is each employee, even your coworkers, have a specific set of needs that need to be fulfilled and a set of job-related behaviors that they have to contribute to the role. Now, the degree to which the organization can take advantage of those behaviors, it can actually fulfill the employee's needs. This will be determined by the person job fit. That's why when employers are hiring for a role, they're trying to understand a couple of things. They're trying to understand your skills, your competencies, your experiences, do they fit the job? But they're also wanting to know, what are you looking for from an employer? From a culture perspective, from a pay, reward perspective, because all those pieces influence behavior. They influence our motivation towards our job, how we interact with our job. And the better the fit between, and then for you, you are also looking for a certain level of pay, opportunities, and all those pieces, the better the fit, the better the working relationship between the individual and the organization. And this is the reason why we emphasize this concept. So we think about individual differences. Everyone comes into a role, a job, or a company with individual personal attributes that are different from others. They may be physical, psychological, or emotional. What drives those individual differences are your personalities, your attitudes, your perceptions, and your stress. And this actually sets the framework for this chapter. So we're going to talk about personality and how that influences individual behavior. Personality are the relative stable set of psychological and behavior attributes that actually sets one person apart from another. And there's this concept called the Big Five personality traits. It's a popular personality framework, and it's based on 5 key traits: agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, extroversion, and openness. And then these personality traits are kind of like in a continuum, right? So you can be highly agreeable, maybe in the middle for conscientiousness, maybe in the middle for neuroticism, maybe a little bit more extroverted, and then maybe in the middle for openness. But this gives you an understanding of how dynamic and fluid these personality traits really are. Agreeableness is a person's ability to really get along with one another. So they're really good at being in teams, they're supportive, they're there to really help bring people together. A conscientious person is able to manage multiple tasks and consistently meet deadlines. They're all about getting stuff done, getting them done right, and getting them done on time. Neuroticism is the extent to which a person at times experiences a little bit of anxiety and is poised, calm, resilient, and secure. So you have one end, someone who is highly neurotic, and another end, someone who's a little bit more calm, resilient in situations, no matter what the situation is. Extroversion is a person's comfort level of relationships, or do relationships drain you, or did it give you excitement? Openness is a person's rigidity of beliefs. And so do they have a range of interests? What are they interested in? So a person who is highly open is open to a lot of ideas. They're very creative. They're willing to take risks. A person who's not as open may not necessarily want to take risks. They're more so planned and more structured. Now, as you look at these Big Five personality traits, which one do you think, or which one of these do you think fits with you the most? And where do you feel like you fit in within the range of personality traits within each of these, not just one, but each of them? The Myers-Briggs framework is a really good tool for you to use to determine where you fall into these different pieces. It's a really awesome questionnaire. I recommend this website called 16personalities.com. It's a free questionnaire, and it helps you determine where you fall into the continuum in each of these personality traits. So I highly recommend that. Now, your book goes into other types of personality traits. So locus of control. Locus of control is the degree to which you believe that your behavior has a direct or indirect impact on the consequences of that behavior. So someone who has an internal locus of control, they believe that they are in control of their lives. And usually people with an internal locus of control are very self-driven, and they believe that whatever they do will lead to an impact on their lives. A person with external locus of control believe that external forces, that they have no control over what happens in their life, and that external forces dictate what happens in their lives. Now, self-efficacy is your belief in your capabilities to perform a certain task, complete a project. So it's when your boss comes to give you a project that may be new, what is your response to that project? Are you confident in your capabilities, or do you believe that you lack the ability to accomplish that work? So individuals with high self-efficacy, they believe that they can perform very well regardless of the task. And even if they may not necessarily have the skills, they have a very strong growth mindset. They will do all that they can in order to accomplish that task. Now, individuals with low self-efficacy, they usually doubt themselves and their ability to perform. And what you'll see here is this connection between self-efficacy and locus of control, right? So a person with this internal locus of control, they're usually high in self-efficacy. They believe in their capabilities. They believe they're in control. A person with an external locus of control and low self-efficacy, they don't believe they're in control, but they also don't believe that they have the ability to perform. So you'll see how some of these traits interact with one another. And your book goes into this concept of authoritarianism. It's the extent to which an individual believes that power and status differences are appropriate, and that it is good to have some type of hierarchical structure within organizations. So they believe in kind of like the power dynamics that come into play when you have top leadership, middle leadership, and lower management as well. Some other personality types that you've probably seen at work is this concept of Machiavellianism. It's about gaining power and controlling the behavior of others. And it's very important to be careful of this trait, because when you become very controlling and you try to gain too much power, you can push your employees away. And so if you've ever been under the kind of leadership where there's your boss doesn't necessarily trust you and tries to control every situation, it can become difficult for employees to really thrive. So it's a trait that you have to be very careful with. Now, self-esteem is very similar to the concept of self-efficacy, but self-esteem focuses more on the extent to which you believe that you are worthwhile and that you deserve or you're worthy in general. So while self-efficacy really focuses on, do I have the capability of accomplishing this task? Self-esteem really focuses on, am I worthy? And again, you'll see self-efficacy, self-esteem, locus of control, they all interact with each other. So do you believe that you have control over your life? Do you believe that you have the capabilities of accomplishing a task? And do you even believe that you're worthy? And those three personality traits are connected to one another in that way. Risk propensity is the degree to which an individual is willing to take risks. So that person, that's kind of like close to the concept of openness, as we saw with the big five personality traits. So it's a degree to which are you willing to take chance? Are you entrepreneurial in that way? So those are some of the other personality traits that you'll see. Now, another very important trait that you'll learn throughout your program here at UMA is this concept of emotional intelligence. It's the extent to which you are self-aware, you manage your emotions. So when situations happen, especially a tough one, so you have a patient who comes into your office and they're very disgruntled and they're angry. How do you respond to that? Or you have your boss gives you a project, but then your coworker needs your help and there's a lot of stuff going on. How do you address that? So are you self-aware, first of all, of what's happening within you? How do you manage your emotions? How do you make sure that you are respectful to your boss, respectful to patients, regardless of what's going on around you? How do you motivate yourself and hold yourself accountable? And how do you express empathy for others and possess social skills? Emotional intelligence gives you the skills to do that. And so the dimensions of EQ is self-awareness, managing your emotions, motivating yourself, empathy, and social skills. Now we talked about personality. Now let's transition over to this concept of attitude. So attitudes are beliefs and feelings that you have about specific ideas, situations, or other people. And we all kind of deal with this cognitive dissonance, right? Where you have conflicting attitudes towards a certain thing. And so our attitudes are constantly shifting. Sometimes one day we go into work and we feel great about our job. There's other days when we feel like, what in the world am I doing, right? So our attitudes about our work, about people, ideas, at times change, which causes that cognitive dissonance. Attitudes influence job satisfaction and our work behaviors. So when we are highly satisfied with our work, we're more satisfied with, and our attitude towards that job increases. But one thing to remember is high levels of job satisfaction does not necessarily mean high job performance. So you may be satisfied with your job and you may be happy, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're taking that satisfaction and that leads to you performing more effectively. There's other pieces that play a role, such as efficacy, locus of control, self-esteem, skills, competence, all of those other pieces. The other piece about attitude is that attitude reflects your ability to be committed to an organization. So it's your identification with the attachment to the organization. So how do you feel about the place that you're working right now? Do you feel committed to accomplishing the goals of that organization? It's something to really think about when you think about committing to the organization and to the vision of your leaders within that organization. So an organization influences behaviors, right? So employee commitment strengthens with age, years within the organization, Do you feel like you have job security? And does your top leadership or your manager or your supervisor, do they allow you to contribute to decision making? It's something to really think about when you're with an organization. Is people are more committed when they feel like they are contributing value to the organization that they work in. You're more satisfied and you're committed to that work. And when you are committed, you're highly reliable, you plan to stay at the organization, and you put in more effort. So this is a difference between job satisfaction and commitment. You may be high in job satisfaction, but it may not necessarily improve performance. But when you're committed to the vision, when you're like, I am working for this healthcare organization because I feel connected to the vision, I feel like I have the skills, I feel valued, I feel seen, I feel heard. And when you have that commitment, you want to contribute to that organization in a powerful way. And then your book talks about the difference between positive affectivity and negative affectivity. So someone who's high in positive affectivity, they're upbeat, they're optimistic, they have an overall sense of well-being. They usually see things in a positive light. They're always in a good mood, right? So that could be you, or that could be a coworker of yours. No matter what situation that comes their way, doesn't matter. They're always going to have a positive mindset. And that actually influences attitude. Now, negative affectivity is a tendency to be downbeat, a little bit more pessimistic, tend to see things in a more negative way, and seem to be in a bad mood. And if we think about how that connects to attitudes, if you're high in positive affectivity, you tend to have a more positive attitude, and that actually influences your behavior, right? The way you show up to work is going to be different than someone who has negative affectivity, a more downbeat attitude. That will influence their behavior, their productivity, even their commitment or satisfaction to their job. So all these pieces that we talked about are all interconnected. Now, the next piece, so we talked about personality, we talked about attitudes. The next piece is perception and individual behavior. So perception is a set of processes in which you become aware and interpret information about the environment that's around you. And a lot of us at times have this selective perceptions, right? So we screen out information that we are uncomfortable with or that contradicts our beliefs. And then we ignore important information, which can be quite detrimental. So it's very important. Our perception, and I'm sure a lot of us have heard this quote, perception is reality, right? So the way we perceive situations. So we may come into work and we may think that our supervisor is in a bad mood because we said hello and they didn't really give us eye contact. So we're going in and we're thinking, oh my gosh, I think I'm about to get fired from my job. And then you start creating this story and it totally ruins your mood. And then you come to find out that, you find out your boss may have lost somebody or they're going through a really tough time. And so even though we became aware of our boss's mood, but the way we interpret it, the key word is interpretation. Now, we may interpret their behavior and body language as something that is because of us, but the reality is they're going through something. And so that's why it's very, very important, because when we ignore important information, like actually my boss is going through a tough situation, it can cause us to not commit to our work, make mistakes, maybe go off on a patient without realizing that, oh wow, I made a mistake. This is not the right interpretation of the situation. So this is why when we go back to this concept of EQ is so important. You want to make sure that you are aware of your perceptions because they influence behavior. Stereotyping is a kind of perception. It's categorizing or labeling people based on a basis of a single attribute. And stereotyping can be very, very dangerous as well, just like selective perception, right? It can cost the organization valuable talent. You can violate laws, and it's very unethical. So to base someone's characteristics just because of a single attribute or who they are can be very, very detrimental and dehumanizing. So it's very, very important that we are aware of the stereotypes, call them out, and make sure we address them right then and there. And an attribution is the process of categorizing or labeling people based on the basis of a single attribute. And some of the behavior attributions, they are formed in different ways. So consensus is where we believe, do other people in the same attribution behave the same way, right? So someone who's, say, for example, has this type of personality or has this type of hair, do they behave in the same way? Consistency is, does this person behave the same way at different times? And distinctiveness is, does this person behave the same way in other situations? So attribution is a way in which we have a tendency to label people based on a single attribute, and then we connect that to their behavior, which is not necessarily always obviously correct. It's almost like if you're not careful, you'll fall into the trap of selective perception or stereotyping. And then so we talked about, again, personality, we talked about perception, attitudes. Now we'll talk about stress and individual behavior. So stress is your response to a strong stimulus, which is usually a stressor. It's kind of like that person in that picture, right? There's so much going on in this person's life. And so it's how we react to that particular stressor. And stress influences people in so many different ways. So if you have a type A, so me, I'm totally type A. I'm competitive. I'm very devoted to my work. And I always have this strong sense of time urgency, no matter what I'm doing. Even if you don't give me a deadline, I feel like I have to get it done now. So we have a lot of drive and we want to accomplish as much as possible, as quickly as possible. So we tend to get very stressed. I feel like for me, I tend to get a little bit stressed because I am so focused on trying to get as much as I can done, even though it's not always possible to get everything done. Type B personalities are more relaxed. They like to have a balanced approach to life. They're less likely to experience personal stress, very jealous, or have conflict with people. And they're less devoted to work and have a weaker sense of time urgency. So they're more on the other side of that continuum. So what are some of the causes of stress? So we all know that stress can come from a myriad of situations, right? So behaviors, it could be psychological, it could be medical, which comes from the personal consequences. So the negative personal consequences of stress can be behavioral, can be psychological, can be medical. The negative work-related consequences, it can cause us to produce poor quality work. It can cause us to become dissatisfied with our work. And then it can cause us to withdraw from my work as well. So this kind of talks about what are some of the causes, but also what are some of the impacts of stress and what happens when you don't manage your stress. It can affect your health, it can affect your well-being, but it can also impact your quality of work, your ability to relate to others, your ability to be committed to your work, and also be absent physically and also mentally from your job. That's why it's very important to manage our stress. So we manage our stress in different ways. These are just 4 different ways, but there's so many other ways to manage your stress. So the first way is regular exercise is very helpful. It helps reduce tension and stress. It actually improves your confidence. It gives you a sense of optimism. It increases your positive affectivity, all those pieces. Relaxation allows individuals to adapt and deal with their stress. So what do you do to relax from a very stressful day? Do you put on some music, drink some tea, read your book? There's so many ways, or meditate. There's so many ways to deal with your stress in a more effective and productive way. Time management is very powerful. This is something that we talk a lot about throughout this program here at UMA, the ability to prioritize activities and accomplish them in order of importance. So say, for example, I have a project that is due on Friday. I need to make sure that I'm prioritizing that project and not try to do a project maybe that's due next week. So it's trying to figure out, how do I prioritize so that I meet my deadlines and I don't feel stressed? This is really good for your type A people. And then support groups. Who is around you? We talk about this concept of having a positive support network. So who is around you that's helping you reduce stress and give you advice so that you can make the best decisions? So we talk about these different individual differences in behavior, and there's different personalities, there's different attitudes, but one of the things that comes out of our individual differences is the way we see life and the way we show up to work. Creativity allows us to find ways to express who we are uniquely. And so it's the ability for an individual to generate new ideas or conceive new perspectives on existing ideas. We all have something to contribute to the world. So when you have an organization that really allows you to share some of those ideas and gives you the platform to do so, it's a really powerful thing. The creative individual has for the creative individual, they have a background experiences in creativity. So many creative individuals were raised in environments where creativity was nurtured. So when you were younger, were you more artistic? Were you more musical? And how is that nurtured in the house? So that's what contributes to the creative individual. Sometimes your personal traits contributes to why you're creative. So people who are creative are very open. They are attracted to complex ideas. They have high levels of energy. They love to be autonomous. They like to kind of like be in their own world, trying to deal with their ideas. They have a strong belief in their own creativity. And then a creative individual, they're highly intelligent. They're both divergent and convergent thinkers. When they read something or they read a new idea, they're able to kind of formulate new connections between those ideas. And that actually was what leads to creativity and insight. So there's different ways to cultivate creativity. There's formal preparation and then there's incubation. So formal education and training is used to get us up to speed. It's like what you're doing here at UMA. You're getting an education, and experiences on the job provides additional knowledge and ideas. Now, incubation is when you take the time to really help build your ideas. It allows you to provide time to really just think about what is it that I want to create, and how do I allow those ideas to develop in a certain period of time. Now, insight is a really powerful experience, right? So for many of us, we could be cooking, in the shower, driving, an idea comes to our minds. And sometimes I kind of look at insight as I lost my keys, don't know where to find them. So I took a break and then I'm washing dishes or maybe sitting down and I realize, oh my gosh, it's right at XYZ. Insight has that same feeling. It's when you take some time to look at a problem and you want to solve it. You're trying to find the best way to serve this patient, or you're trying to find the best process, but you don't know what it is. So you take the time to step away. And when you come back, you're able to, it's a breakthrough. It's a spontaneous breakthrough. That's why taking a break and incubating your ideas is a really great way to get insight. And it's kind of like patterns of thoughts. They kind of coalesce into a new understanding of certain things. Now, verification is when you do a couple of tests, you pilot an idea, and then you're trying to determine whatever your hypothesis is leads to a certain result. So your goal is to determine, okay, if I'm able to provide this kind of service or this kind of process to a patient, will it actually lead to the result that I'm looking for? So verification, that process helps us do that. Now, how can organizations enhance creativity? They can do it in a couple of ways. It's important for it to be embedded into the organization's culture. So in this class, we'll learn about what is culture, because culture, having a culture of creativity, if you think about some of these big tech companies, Google, Apple, Tesla, a lot of these companies, having a culture of creativity is embedded into their culture. So they allow their employees, like Google has this really cool concept called, I think it's like the 5% time, where employees are able to nurture their creativity. If you think about like Gmail, some of these other apps that have been created by Google, it's because Google gives employees time to think about their ideas and create and incubate them, experience insight, and now they turn into really cool products and services. So it's important for organizations to give employees space to create. You can set goals for revenue. So provide incentives and reward people, and don't punish people for creating new ideas that may not necessarily work. That's totally fine. Failure is a good thing. It teaches us, but it's important for organizations to cultivate that. And then your book closes with the types of workplace behavior. So there's different types of workplace behavior, but workplace behavior within itself is a pattern of action by the members or employees with an organization that can actually directly or indirectly influence how effective your organization is. And then performance behaviors are a total set of workplace behaviors that an organization expects you as an individual to display. And usually you'll see that in the employee handbook. HR will do a training. It's usually in the code of ethics. So your job will tell you how they expect you to operate within the context of their organization. Now, there's different types of workplace behavior. There's kind of like the negative side, which is withdrawal behavior, when an individual does not show up for work. It may be a symptom of other problems, turnover when people quit their jobs. Turnover costs companies a lot of money. People quit their jobs for work-related reasons or conflict or even personal reasons to take care of family or some other things too, which is important to understand. And then there's also this other side of workplace behavior, which is organization citizenship, which it's very similar to commitment, where an organization makes a positive overall contribution to the organization. And what determines that is usually your personality, the social context, and then how does your organization reward citizenship? Is there a way for your organization to really provide incentives to help people become good citizens of the organization? And dysfunctional behavior is kind of like what we talked about earlier, those that detract from or don't contribute to organization performance. So absenteeism, theft, sexual or racial harassment, politicized behavior, intentionally misleading or manipulating people, spreading rumors, workplace violence, all of those dysfunctional behaviors doesn't just affect a small group of people, it can affect everyone. It can affect the culture. So those are really, really important behaviors, especially as managers, to pay attention to. So we talked about a lot. We talked about what are all these individual differences in behavior? How do they impact the organization? And how does it impact you as an employee? And what do you need to be aware of? So there's some key takeaways I want us to have as we close out this chapter. One thing to remember is that our personalities influence our behaviors, and self-awareness is key. We have the ability to influence our attitudes. So it's important to be more aware of our thoughts and feelings because they actually inform our behavior. There are many, many causes of stress. So we have to find ways to manage them so we show up our best selves and provide value to the workplace. Creativity gives us space to bring novel ideas to our organization. So we have to find ways to cultivate that creativity. And hopefully we can work in organizations that allow us to use our creative geniuses to solve the problems that our patients and different colleagues are facing. And lastly, workplace behaviors can indirectly or directly influence organizational effectiveness. So that's why we must become aware of our own behavior and aware of the behavior of others and how they influence the organization as a whole. All those collections of behaviors impact the performance of the organization. So it's super, super important that we are aware and that we hold our team members and our employees accountable to performing behaviors that are effective, that contribute to the organization. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this lecture. I hope it was informational and I hope you're able to bring it into your life. Thank you so much.